That percentage dropped to absolute zero the day Mira Kane walked into our classroom. You want to know about the most terrifying 15 seconds in Galactic Academy history? Well, buckle your gravity harnesses, because what happened in Tactical Combat Theory class on Station Kepler 9 will make your scales crawl. My name is Torek Vel, and I am a Zentorian combat analyst. My people have been studying warfare for 3,000 cycles, dissecting every battle, every strategy, every tactical blunder across 17 star systems. We pride ourselves on our analytical minds, our ability to predict combat outcomes with 97.4% accuracy. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me paint you the scene properly, because context matters when you are dealing with humans, especially Deathworld humans. Especially this particular Deathworld human, who turned our prestigious academy into a medical emergency zone faster than a plasma torpedo through paper armor. The Galactic Military Academy on Station Kepler 9 houses the finest warrior minds from 43 species. Korvax sepsuchers who can tear through reinforced steel with their bare claws. Viridian psychic warriors who can crush mines from across a battlefield. Thermal-resistant Pyrexians who fight inside active volcanoes for training. We had seen it all. Or so we thought. Professor Haskanine, our tactical combat theory instructor, was explaining siege warfare mechanics when the classroom door hissed open. In walked a creature that made every predator instinct in the room spike to maximum alert. She was small by galactic standards, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with that distinctive Deathworlder build. Compact muscle wrapped around reinforced bone structure. Brown hair pulled back in what humans call a ponytail. Dark eyes that scanned the room like targeting sensors acquiring threats. "Ah, our new transfer student," Professor Haskanine announced, his mechanical voice carrying that distinctive Andromedian monotone. "Class, this is Cadet Mira Kane from Earth. She will be joining our Advanced Tactical Studies program." A ripple of whispers spread through the classroom. Earth. The Deathworld that produced the most psychotically effective soldiers in known space. The planet where everything tried to kill you, including the weather, the wildlife, and apparently the people themselves. Cadet Kane moved to an empty seat in the third row, her steps precise and measured. She did not acknowledge the stares, did not respond to the barely concealed hostility radiating from certain corners of the room, just sat down, pulled out her datapad, and waited for instruction like a coiled spring. Sitting behind her was Vorthak Prime, a Korthak noble's son who stood nearly 8 feet tall and possessed enough arrogance to power a small battlecruiser. His species was known for their brutality, their pack mentality, and their absolute disdain for anything they perceived as weak. Ichu was right, sat Xylon 7, a crystalline warrior whose silicon-based biology made him virtually indestructible. Across the aisle were the Nexus twins, Kex and Pex, genetically enhanced super soldiers from the Outer Rim colonies. That should have been our first warning. 4 of the deadliest cadets in our class, all positioned around the small human-like predators circling wounded prey. Professor Haskanine continued his lecture on siege tactics, projecting holographic battle scenarios into the center of the room. Cadet Kane took notes, asked intelligent questions about supply line vulnerabilities and defensive positioning. Her tactical insights were sharp, cutting through complex problems with surgical precision. Looking back now, I realized they had it completely backwards. That was the second warning we missed. 20 minutes into the class, Vorthak Prime leaned forward and whispered something in Cadet Kane's ear. I could not hear the exact words, but I caught fragments. Something about Deathworld weakness. Something about putting her in her place. Something that made her shoulders tense slightly. She turned around slowly, looked directly into Vorthak Prime's predatory yellow eyes, and said in a voice that could cut diamond, "Say that again." Louder this time. The entire classroom went silent. Even Professor Haskanine stopped mid-sentence, his mechanical sensors focusing on the developing situation. Cadet Kane nodded slowly, as if processing this information. "Interesting hypothesis," she said, her tone conversational. "Care to test it?" Vorthak Prime grinned, showing rows of serrated teeth. "I said, little Deathworlder, that your species might be tough on your pathetic planet, but here you are, just another weak mammal playing soldier. What happened next violated every law of physics I thought I understood. That was when Xylon 7 made his mistake. He reached out with one massive crystalline hand and grabbed Cadet Kane's shoulder. "The Korvax speaks truth, flesh being. You do not belong among warriors." Cadet Kane moved. Not moved like the rest of us move. Moved like gravity itself had decided to relocate. Her right elbow snapped backwards into Xelon 7's solar plexus with enough force to crack his crystalline structure. The sound was like a glacier breaking. As he doubled over in shock, she grabbed his extended arm, pivoted on her left foot, and used his own momentum to launch him over her shoulder into Vorthek Prime. Both aliens crashed into the floor in a tangle of limbs and surprised roars. 3 seconds elapsed. The Nexus twins reacted with enhanced reflexes, moving to flank her from both sides. Kex came in low with a grappling maneuver designed to take down creatures twice his size. Kex aimed a nerve strike at her neck that should have paralyzed her instantly. Cadet Kane ducked under Kex's strike while simultaneously bringing her knee up into Kex's advancing chest. The impact lifted the enhanced soldier off his feet and sent him flying backwards into a bank of computer terminals. Sparks erupted as his body short-circuited half the classroom's equipment. Without missing a beat, she grabbed Pex's extended arm, twisted it in a direction that anatomy clearly did not intend, and used the leverage to flip him face first into the floor. The metallic deck plating dented from the impact. 8 seconds total. Vorthek Prime was back on his feet now, 8 feet of apex predator fury charging toward the small human with claws extended and death in his eyes. He outweighed her by at least 300 pounds and possessed reflexes honed by millions of years of evolution on a world where only the deadliest survived. Cadet Kane waited until he was 2 steps away, then did something that made my analytical mind simply shut down. She stepped into his charge, into it most beings would step back, step aside, try to create distance. She eliminated inside his reach, where his size advantage became a liability. Using his broken arm as a lever, she spun him around and drove him face first into the nearest wall. The reinforced polymer cracked from the impact. Vorthek Prime slid down the wall and hit a floor, unconscious before he landed. Her left hand caught his right wrist. Her right hand slammed into his elbow joint. Physics took care of the rest. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the classroom like a gunshot. Vorthek Prime's roar of pain rattled the walls as his arm bent in ways that violated the basic engineering principles of Korthak physiology. Cadet Kane was not finished. She moved again. 12 seconds. Xelon 7 was struggling to his feet, his crystalline structure still showing stress fractures from her initial strike. He reached for her with obviously murderous intent. 15 seconds. A spinning kick that caught him in the temple. The impact resonated through his silicon-based anatomy like a bell being struck. His optical sensors flickered once, twice, then went dark as his consciousness shut down for its own protection. 4 of the most dangerous predators in our class lay scattered around the room like broken toys. Cadet Kane stood in the center of the carnage, not even breathing hard. Her ponytail had not even come loose. She looked around the silent classroom, made eye contact with each of us in turn, then sat back down at her desk, opened her datapad, looked expectantly at Professor Haskanine. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute. Professor Haskanine's mechanical processors were clearly struggling to parse what his sensors had recorded. Finally, he activated the emergency medical alert. "You were saying something about defensive positioning during extended siege operations," she asked, as if nothing had happened. "Medical team to classroom 7. We have casualties." That was when I realized something that chilled my analytical soul to its core. As the medical drones arrived to collect the unconscious predators, I found myself studying Cadet Kane with new eyes. This small, seemingly fragile creature had just dismantled 4 elite warriors without breaking a sweat, without even seeming particularly angry about it. The entire fight, every move she made, every strike she delivered, had been precisely calibrated. She could have killed all 4 of them, could have turned their bones to powder, their organs to paste. Instead, she had applied exactly enough force to neutralize the threats while keeping them alive. She had been holding back, which meant she had been thinking tactically throughout the entire encounter. Planning, calculating, fighting with her brain as much as her body. As the medical team carried out the last of the unconscious attackers, Cadet Kane turned to look directly at me. Those dark eyes held depths I could not fathom. Intelligence that scared me more than any weapon. "Is there a problem, Cadet Turikville?" she asked quietly. I realized I had been staring. "No problem," I managed to say. "Just impressed." She smiled then. A small, almost sad expression that somehow made her seem more terrifying rather than less. "That was not impressive," she said. "That was Tuesday." Professor Hask-9 cleared his throat mechanically. "Well then, shall we continue with siege warfare theory?" The rest of the class passed in surreal normalcy. Professor Hask-9 lectured. Students took notes. Cadet Kane participated in discussions with the same analytical precision she had demonstrated in combat, as if she had not just rewritten our understanding of what was possible in hand-to-hand combat. But I could not concentrate. My mind kept replaying those 15 seconds, analyzing every move, every decision, every microsecond of the encounter, and the more I analyzed, the more questions emerged. How had she moved that fast? How had she calculated the precise force needed for each strike while under attack from multiple directions? How had she maintained tactical awareness throughout an engagement that should have been pure chaos? And most importantly, what kind of world produces warriors like this? When class ended, most students filed out quickly. Nobody wanted to linger near the Deathworlder. I was gathering my materials when Cadet Kane approached my desk. "You have questions?" she said. It was not a question. "Walk with me," she said. "I will try to answer some of them." We left the classroom together, walking through the academy's main corridor. Other students gave us a wide berth. Word had apparently spread quickly about what had happened in tactical combat theory. "Many questions," I admitted. "First question," I said. "How did you move so fast?" "I did not move fast," she replied. "I moved efficiently. Speed is not about how quickly you can swing your fist. It is about how quickly you can get from where you are to where you need to be. That explains nothing. That sounds—" She laughed, a sound that was somehow both musical and predatory. "Earth is not a kind planet, Turikville. Every day is a fight for survival. We learn to fight before we learn to walk properly. We learn tactics before we learn mathematics. We learn to kill before we learn to love." "Horrible," she supplied. "It is. But it also makes us very, very good at staying alive." We passed a group of Viridian cadets who watched us nervously. Their psychic abilities probably let them sense the danger radiating from Cadet Kane like heat from a star. She stopped walking and looked at me with those unsettling dark eyes. "How do you know I held back?" "Second question," I said. "Why did you hold back?" "Your precision. You could have killed them." "Yes," she said simply. "I could have. But they were not enemies. They were just bullies. And bullies do not deserve death. They deserve education." What they received looked quite educational. We continued walking in silence for a few moments. The Academy's artificial gravity hummed quietly beneath our feet, maintaining the standard 1.2 G environment that accommodated most species. I wondered how it felt to someone from a high-gravity death world. "Oh, that was just the introduction course," she said with that predatory smile. "The advanced curriculum comes later if they are stupid enough to require it." "Final question," I said as we reached the dormitory section. "What happens now?" "Now?" Cadet Kane paused at the entrance to her quarters. "Now I study for tomorrow's advanced weapons theory exam, and you go back to your room and try to process what you witnessed today." "I meant what happens with Vorthak Prime and the others." Her expression grew serious. "They will recover. They will be angry. They will probably try something even more stupid next time. And then," with that cheerful promise of future violence, she disappeared into her quarters, leaving me standing alone in the corridor. "And then I will educate them again. More thoroughly, if necessary." I made my way back to my own room, my mind churning with everything I had witnessed. As a Zentarian combat analyst, I prided myself on understanding warfare in all its forms. But this was something entirely new. I spent the next 3 hours reviewing security footage of the incident, analyzing every frame, every angle, every detail. The more I studied it, the more convinced I became that we had all missed something crucial. This was not just combat. This was artistry. Terrible, beautiful artistry painted in movement and violence in controlled fury. which raised a terrifying question. If that was her holding back significantly, what did she look like when she actually tried? Cadet Kane had not just defeated 4 elite warriors. She had made it look easy, effortless, like she was holding back not just her lethal potential but her actual capabilities as well. I was still pondering this when my communicator chimed with an incoming message. Academy Medical Bay. 4 cadets had been treated for various injuries and released. All were expected to make full recoveries. There was a notation at the bottom of the report that made my blood chill. Injuries consistent with professional combat training. Precision strikes designed to incapacitate without permanent damage. Recommend advanced medical monitoring and psychological evaluation for all involved parties. Professional combat training. The medical AI had recognized the signatures of advanced military technique in those strikes, and then 6 months ago, all her military records had been classified, sealed under Galactic Command Authority. Whatever she had been doing in those contested systems, someone very important wanted it kept secret. I checked her academy file using my analyst clearance to access her background records. Born on Earth, in a place called Nevada. Military academy training from age 12. 3 combat deployments to contested systems. Decorated for valor under fire. Which meant Cadet Kane was not just a tough Deathworlder with good reflexes. She was a trained soldier. A professional killer who had somehow ended up in our classroom, pretending to be a student. My hands were shaking as I closed the file. We had not just been sharing a classroom with a Deathworlder. We had been sharing a classroom with a Deathworlder, Special Forces operative whose recent activities were classified at the highest levels. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes I saw those 15 seconds playing out again. The fluid movement. The precise strikes. The cold calculation behind every action. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. They were about to learn the difference between a Deathworlder and a Deathworlder who had been professionally trained to kill. Somewhere in the station's medical bay, 4 predators were nursing their wounds and plotting revenge. They had no idea what they were really dealing with. They thought they had encountered a tough student who had gotten lucky, and I had front row seats to what promised to be the most educational massacre in Academy history. Sleep, as it turned out, was a luxury I could not afford that night. Because at precisely 0300 hours, my door chimed with an emergency override code that made my scales stand on end. Standing outside my quarters was Commander Thex Alpha, the Academy's chief of security. Her metallic Andromedian frame filled the doorway like a living weapon. Optical sensors glowing that particular shade of red that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Cadet Toric Vel, she said in that mechanical monotone that somehow managed to convey barely controlled fury. We need to talk. I invited her in, my analytical mind already working through the possible reasons for a middle-of-the-night visit from Academy security. None of them were good. You witnessed the incident in Tactical Combat Theory class, she stated. Not a question. Yes, Commander. My blood temperature dropped several degrees. Yes, Commander. You have been asking questions about Cadet Kane's background. She moved to my window, looking out at the stars beyond the station's hull. Stop asking questions, Cadet Toric Vel. For your own safety. Commander, I am a combat analyst. Questions are what I do. Not about her. She turned back to face me, and her optical sensors had shifted to that deep orange that meant maximum threat assessment mode. Cadet Kane's background is classified for reasons that go far beyond Academy politics. There are things happening in this galaxy that you are not cleared to know about. Wars that officially do not exist. Operations that never happened. And soldiers who are not supposed to be here. My mind raced through the implications. She is not really a student. And if I cannot forget, the commander's optical sensors flared bright red. Then you might find yourself transferred to a monitoring station in the outer rim where asking the wrong questions gets you spaced without a suit. She is whatever Galactic Command needs her to be, Commander Thex Alpha replied. Right now they need her to be a student. Your job is to forget everything you think you learned about her and focus on your studies. So naturally, I spent the next 3 hours digging deeper. With that cheerful threat hanging in the air, she left me alone with my thoughts and a growing certainty that I was in way over my head. But here is the thing about being a Zentarian combat analyst. We cannot help ourselves. We see patterns, we ask questions, we dig for truth even when that truth might get us killed. It is what makes us excellent at our jobs and terrible at staying out of trouble. The Academy's network was more secure than a crystalline vault, but I had been studying system vulnerabilities for 2 years. Nothing was truly impenetrable if you knew where to look, and what I found in the classified databases made my previous discoveries look like children's games. Mira Kane was not just a Special Forces operative. She was part of something called the Terran Ghost Protocol, a program so classified that even its existence was denied by Galactic Command. The file fragments I managed to access before the security algorithms noticed my intrusion painted a picture that terrified me. Experimental enhancement programs, psychological conditioning that bordered on programming, combat effectiveness ratings that exceeded anything in recorded galactic history, and deployment records to systems that officially had never seen conflict. 17,000. The last entry in her file was a mission designation, Operation Silent Thunder. Location classified. Objective classified. Outcome classified. But there was a casualty report attached. 17,000 enemy combatants eliminated. 0 friendly casualties. I sat back in my chair, my analytical mind struggling to process those numbers. One human soldier had somehow eliminated 17,000 enemy combatants without losing a single ally. That was not just impressive. That was impossible. Unless it was not. My door chimed again. This time it was not Commander Thex Alpha. It was Cadet Kane herself standing in my doorway with an expression that could have frozen plasma. She was still in her academy uniform, but something about her posture had changed. The careful facade of student had been replaced by something predatory and professional. "May I come in?" she asked politely. I stepped aside, noting how she moved past me with the fluid grace of someone constantly assessing threats and escape routes. She glanced at my computer terminal, where classified file fragments were still displayed on the screen. "You have been busy tonight," she observed. "Like Operation Silent Thunder. Curiosity can be dangerous," she said, settling into my desk chair with the casual confidence of someone who owned whatever space she occupied, especially when it involves things you are not supposed to know about. "I am a curious person. I cannot. My analytical mind does not work that way. You should delete those files and forget you ever saw them," she said quietly. Her expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. Something cold and calculating that made me want to back away slowly. She nodded slowly, as if she had expected that answer. "Then let me give you some free advice, Torikvel. There are predators in this galaxy that make the ones I fought today look like harmless pets. Things that hunt in the spaces between stars. Things that turn entire civilizations into feeding grounds. And sometimes when the situation is desperate enough, Galactic Command sends people like me to deal with those things. Weapons," she said simply. "Living weapons designed for one purpose: to kill things that cannot be killed by conventional means. People like you." The casual way she said it made my blood freeze. This was not boasting or intimidation. This was just fact, delivered with the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. "We're not the worst part of that mission," she replied. "The worst part was what they had done to the colonists before we arrived. What they were planning to do to the rest of the sector. Sometimes, Torikvel, the only way to stop a monster is to become something worse." The 17,000 casualties. Why? Because Vorthak Prime and his friends are not the type to accept humiliation quietly. They are planning something stupid and violent and ultimately futile. She stood up, moving toward the door. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be interesting." She paused at the door, looking back with that predatory smile. "Because I would be planning the same thing if our positions were reversed. The difference is, my plan would actually work." "How do you know?" After she left, I sat in the darkness of my quarters, staring out at the stars and trying to process everything I had learned. Mira Kane was not just a student or even a soldier. She was something else entirely. A weapon in human form, sent here for reasons I could not begin to understand. I must have dozed off eventually, because the next thing I knew, my alarm was chiming with the Academy's standard wake-up sequence. 6 hours until first class. 6 hours until whatever Vorthok Prime and his companions had planned, and tomorrow that weapon was going to be tested again. The academy cafeteria was buzzing with tension when I arrived for morning meal. News of yesterday's incident had spread through the station like plasma fire. Clusters of cadets huddled together, speaking in hushed tones and casting nervous glances toward the table where Cadet Kane sat alone, calmly eating her breakfast and reading tactical reports on her datapad. She looked perfectly normal. Just another student preparing for another day of classes. But now I could see what I had missed before. The way she positioned herself with clear sight lines to all entrances. The way her free hand rested casually near her eating utensil, ready to turn it into a weapon. The way she tracked movement in her peripheral vision without appearing to look. She was not eating breakfast. She was conducting surveillance. Vorthok Prime entered the cafeteria 20 minutes later, flanked by his 3 companions. All 4 moved with the careful gait of beings nursing injuries. But their eyes burned with the promise of violence. They collected their meals and sat at a table across the room from Cadet Kane, making no attempt to hide their hostile stares. Other students began evacuating the area. Whatever was coming, nobody wanted to be caught in the crossfire. The confrontation began when Zealon 7 stood up and walked deliberately toward Cadet Kane's table. His crystalline structure had been repaired, but stress fractures were still visible on his torso where her elbow had connected. I remained seated, my analytical curiosity overriding my survival instincts. This was going to be educational, one way or another. "Human?" he said loudly, his voice carrying across the now silent cafeteria. "We require satisfaction for yesterday's insult." "Combat arena," Vorthok Prime called from across the room. "All 4 of us, against you. No weapons, no outside interference, just warrior against warrior." Cadet Kane did not look up from her datapad. "You require medical attention if you think challenging me again is a good idea." Now she did look up, her dark eyes scanning the 4 aliens with clinical assessment. "You want a rematch?" Cadet Kane set down her datapad and leaned back in her chair. "Justice? Yesterday you 4 attacked an unprepared opponent during class time. Today you want to formalize your attempt to commit assault. That is not justice. That is stupidity with paperwork." "We want justice," Kex growled, his enhanced musculature still showing bruises from yesterday's encounter. "Are you afraid, Deathworlder?" Pex taunted. "I am not afraid of you," she said quietly. "I am afraid for you. There is a difference." The temperature in the cafeteria seemed to drop several degrees. Cadet Kane's expression did not change, but something shifted in the air around her. Something that made my predator recognition software scream warnings. "Combat arena," Vorthok Prime repeated. 1 hour. 4 against 1. Winner takes all. Winner takes what, exactly? Your place in this academy. Lose, and you transfer off station. Forever. Cadet Kane considered this for a long moment. Around the cafeteria, students held their breath, waiting for her response. "Counter-proposal," she said finally. "Same terms, but when I win, all 4 of you transfer to remedial combat training on Mining Station Zeta 7, where you will spend the next 2 years learning the difference between warrior pride and warrior skill." The insult hit home. Mining Station Zeta 7 was where the academy sent cadets who could not meet basic combat standards. Being assigned there was considered a career-ending humiliation. "Agreed," Vorthok Prime snarled. "Excellent," Cadet Kane said, returning to her breakfast as if nothing had happened. "See you in an hour." The 4 aliens stalked out of the cafeteria, radiating fury and murderous intent. Other students began filtering back in, their conversations focused entirely on the upcoming match. I approached Cadet Kane's table, my analytical mind churning with questions and concerns. "This is not a good idea," I said. "Probably not," she agreed, not looking up from her datapad. "They will have spent all night planning, coordinating their attack, working out strategies to neutralize your advantages." "I hope so. It would be disappointing if they had not learned anything from yesterday. You could be seriously injured. Or worse." Now she did look up and her expression was almost amused. "Corval, do you know what the definition of overkill is?" "Close," she said. Overkill is when you use a planetary bombardment cannon to eliminate a single infantry unit. It is disproportionate, wasteful, inefficient, excessive force applied to achieve an objective. I do not understand the relevance. Yesterday I used exactly enough force to neutralize 4 threats without causing permanent damage. That was proportional response. Today they are demanding a formal combat engagement with no restrictions on force application. The implications hit me like a plasma torpedo. You were holding back significantly yesterday. They do not realize what they are asking for. No, she said, her voice carrying that predatory edge again. They do not. But they are about to learn. Significantly, she confirmed. Today I will not be. 1 hour later, the Academy's main combat arena was packed beyond capacity. Students from every species and every year level had crowded in to witness what promised to be either an epic battle or a spectacular execution. It was about to be tested beyond its design specifications. Then Cadet Kane entered the arena, and the entire atmosphere changed. They looked dangerous. Professional, deadly. She looked like death in human form. She moved with the fluid grace of someone for whom violence was not just a skill but an art form. Her academy uniform had been replaced by form-fitting combat gear that did nothing to hide the predatory menace radiating from her small frame. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight braid and her eyes held the cold calculation of a professional killer preparing for work. Against Mira Kane it was suicide by committee. "Begin combat," announced the arena's automated system. For a moment, nobody moved. The 4 aliens held their positions, waiting for the perfect moment to coordinate their assault. Cadet Kane stood in the center of the arena, completely relaxed, hands at her sides. Cadet Kane moved like physics had decided to take a coffee break. She flowed around Vorthik Prime's charge, her right hand striking 3 pressure points along his spine in rapid succession. The massive Korthic warrior collapsed instantly, his nervous system temporarily disconnected from his voluntary muscle control. Then Vorthak Prime roared a battle cry and charged. What followed was not a fight. It was a masterclass in applied violence. Xelon 7 attacked from the left, his crystalline fists moving fast enough to shatter steel. Itatane caught his leading hand, twisted her body, and used his own momentum to launch him across the arena into the energy barrier. The impact resonated through the chamber like a bell being struck. Her stress fractures spiderwebbed across his entire structure as he slid to the floor, unconscious. The Nexus twins came at her from opposite sides, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to move in perfect synchronization. It did not matter. Cadet Kane seemed to exist in a different time stream, her movements flowing between their attacks like water through a sieve. A spinning kick caught Kex in the solar plexus, lifting him off the ground and sending him crashing into the arena wall. Kex managed to land a glancing blow on her shoulder before her elbow found his temple, dropping him like a discarded weapon. Total elapsed time 7 seconds. The silence in the arena was absolute. Hundreds of cadets stared in stunned disbelief at what they had just witnessed. This had not been a fight. This had been an execution. Clean, efficient, and utterly without mercy. 4 elite warriors lay scattered around the arena like broken dolls. Cadet Kane stood in the center of the carnage, not even breathing hard. Cadet Kane walked over to where Vorthak Prime lay paralyzed but conscious, his eyes wide with shock and terror. She turned and walked toward the exit, pausing only to address the stunned crowd. "Class dismissed," she said with that predatory smile. "You wanted to know what a real Deathworlder looks like," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the silent arena. "Congratulations, now you know." Tomorrow's Advanced Weapons Theory class was going to be very interesting indeed. As the medical teams rushed into the arena to collect the casualties, I realized that everything I thought I knew about human combat capability had been completely wrong. Cadet Kane had not just defeated 4 elite warriors, she had made it look effortless. And if the classified files were accurate, this was still just a fraction of what she was actually capable of. 3 days passed after the arena incident, and the Academy had settled into an uneasy quiet. Vorthak Prime and his companions had been transferred to Mining Station Zeta 7 as promised. Their departure marked by a level of humiliation that would follow them for the rest of their military careers. Cadet Kane resumed her normal routine of attending classes, taking notes, and pretending to be just another student. But I was no longer fooled by the performance. My analytical mind had been working overtime, connecting patterns and drawing conclusions that made my scales crawl with anticipation. Because here is the thing about weapons like Mira Kane. They are not deployed for training exercises or academic programs. They are deployed when something is about to go very, very wrong. And something was definitely about to go wrong. Then came the restricted access announcements. Certain sections of the station were suddenly off-limits to cadets. The weapons training facilities were locked down. Most tellingly, the emergency evacuation pods were inspected and restocked. It started with subtle changes in station security protocols, additional patrol schedules, enhanced sensor sweeps of the surrounding space, communications blackouts that lasted just long enough to be suspicious. Commander Fex Alpha moved through the corridors with the mechanical urgency of someone expecting trouble. The attack came during advanced weapons theory class, naturally, because the universe has a sense of irony that borders on sadistic. When I tried to access the Academy's external sensor data, I found my clearance had been revoked. Whatever was happening out there in the darkness between stars, someone did not want students knowing about it. That should have been my first clue that we were all about to become very educated in the practical applications of terror. Professor Kane 7 was explaining the theoretical limitations of energy shield technology. When the station's emergency klaxons began their bone-chilling wail, red emergency lighting bathed the classroom in hellish illumination as the automated voice began its announcement. Through the classroom's reinforced viewport, I could see shapes moving in the darkness. Ships, but not like any I had seen before. They moved with organic fluidity, their hulls seeming to ripple and shift as they approached the station. Their design aesthetic was wrong in ways that made my analytical mind recoil. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Unknown vessels have breached the outer perimeter. All combat personnel report to defensive positions immediately. Professor Kane 7 was attempting to maintain order, directing students toward emergency evacuation routes, when the first boarding pod struck the station's hull. The impact sent vibrations through the superstructure that I felt in my bones. He never finished the sentence. Everyone remain calm, the professor announced, his voice carrying the authority of centuries of military experience. Proceed to evacuation stations in an orderly. The classroom door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Through the smoking breach poured creatures that violated every principle of biology I thought I understood. They moved on too many legs, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming with an oily iridescence that hurt to look at directly. Multiple eyes tracked independent targets while mandibles designed for ripping through armor clicked hungrily. Hive-spawn, the nightmare species that had been terrorizing the outer colonies for the past year. The ones Galactic Command officially denied existed. The ones that turned living beings into feeding material for their broods. Professor Kane 7 managed to draw his sidearm before the leading creature took his head off with one casual swipe of its razor-sharp forelimbs. His body hit the floor in a spray of blue and Dramedian blood while the rest of the class screamed in terror. Students scattered in every direction, some heading for the windows, others trying to reach the shattered doorway. Most of them did not make it 3 steps before the creatures were among them, their feeding appendages finding soft flesh with horrifying efficiency. I pressed myself against the wall, my survival instincts screaming at me to run, to hide, to do anything except stand there and watch the slaughter. But my analytical mind was focused on something else entirely, just cold, calculating assessment. Cadet Kane had not moved. She sat in her usual seat, watching the carnage with the clinical detachment of someone observing a training exercise. No fear, no panic, no desperate scramble for survival. The creature lunged, forelimbs extended to tear through flesh and bone. Cadet Kane moved. One of the creatures noticed her stillness and skittered toward her desk, its multiple eyes focusing on what it probably assumed was an easy target. A small, terrified student too paralyzed by fear to run. It was about to learn the difference between paralyzed by fear and waiting for the right moment. Dead, in one strike. Not moved like she had in the classroom fight. Not moved like she had in the arena. Moved like physics was just a polite suggestion that she had decided to ignore. Her right hand caught the creature's leading forelimb. Her left hand struck its thorax and the laws of biology gave up trying to make sense of what happened next. The chitinous exoskeleton, designed to withstand military-grade weapons fire, cracked like an egg. Internal organs that should have been protected by redundant armor systems ruptured instantly. The creature hit the floor in a spreading pool of luminescent fluid that had been keeping it alive moments before. The remaining creatures in the classroom turned toward this new threat, their primitive nervous systems recognizing a predator when they encountered one. They attacked in a coordinated swarm, moving with the lethal efficiency of apex hunters. Cadet Kane disappeared. That is the only way I can describe what happened. One moment she was standing next to her desk. The next moment she was among them, moving through their ranks like death itself had decided to take up interpretive dance. Her movements were poetry written in violence. Every strike placed with surgical precision. Every step calculated to avoid incoming attacks while positioning for the next kill. She flowed between their snapping mandibles and slashing forelimbs like she existed in a different time stream entirely. The creatures fell around her like wheat before a harvester. Exoskeletons shattered. Organs ruptured. Vital fluids painted the walls in abstract patterns that would have been beautiful if they had not represented the systematic extermination of nightmares. In 30 seconds, 12 hive-spawn lay dead on the classroom floor. Most of the surviving students were too shocked to respond. They stared at her with expressions of awe and terror, trying to process what they had witnessed. Cadet Kane stood in the center of the carnage, her academy uniform somehow still pristine despite being surrounded by the remains of creatures designed to kill anything that moved. She looked around the room, taking inventory of survivors. "Is anyone injured?" she asked calmly, as if she had not just single-handedly eliminated a squad of the most dangerous predators in known space. Operative Kane, not Cadet Kane. Operative. I found my voice first. "How?" I managed to cry. "Training," she replied, pulling a communicator from her uniform. "Command? This is Operative Kane. Academy Classroom 7 is secure. Beginning sweep of adjacent sections." The corridors outside were a war zone. Emergency lighting flickered through smoke and debris. Distant weapon fire echoed from multiple directions. Bodies of both defenders and attackers littered the floor, evidence of running battles throughout the station. "Torikvel," she said, looking directly at me. "You wanted to understand what I really am. Come with me. It is time for your final education." She moved toward the shattered doorway, stepping over the bodies of creatures that had been trying to kill us moments before. I followed, my analytical mind struggling to keep up with the revelations. "So they sent you." But Cadet Kane moved through it all with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going and what she would find when she got there. "The hive spawn have been hitting outer colonies for 8 months, she explained as we moved through the carnage. Galactic Command has been trying to handle it through conventional military response. It has not been working. They sent me to academy duty because intelligence suggested the hive might target this station. Too many high-value military offspring concentrated in one location. Too tempting a target for creatures that feed on intelligent life. We reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Bodies were scattered in all directions, evidence of a desperate last stand by Academy security forces. The defensive position had been overrun, but not easy. "You were bait," I realized. "What trap?" "I was insurance," she corrected. "The bait was the station itself. I was here to make sure the trap actually worked." Instead of answering, she led me to a maintenance access panel and began entering codes that definitely were not in any student manual. The maintenance panel slid aside, revealing a concealed arsenal that made my analytical mind shut down briefly. Military-grade weapons, armor systems, equipment that belonged on a battlecruiser, not in an academy maintenance closet. "The hive spawn are not just predators," she explained, as hidden mechanisms whirred to life. "They are scouts, advance reconnaissance for something much larger. Every colony they have hit, every ship they have destroyed has been mapped and catalogued. They are preparing for a major offensive against the core worlds. But here is what they do not understand about humans," she continued, selecting a rifle that looked like it could punch holes through asteroid armor. "We do not just fight to win. We fight to send messages. The kind that says, if you threaten us, we will not just kill you. We will kill you so thoroughly, so completely, that the memory of your death will haunt your species for generations. What kind of messages? She handed me a sidearm and a basic armor vest. Stay close, try not to die, and watch carefully, because what you are about to see is why the galaxy fears us. But they had bought time for someone like Mira Kane to reach the station's central command center. We moved deeper into the station, following corridors that had been turned into killing fields. The hive-spawn had clearly expected to overrun the academy through sheer numbers and ferocity. What they had found instead was a population of elite military cadets who had been trained to fight from childhood. The battles had been brutal, desperate, and ultimately futile for the defenders. The massive blast doors to Command Central had been breached, torn apart by weapons that left characteristic scoring patterns in the reinforced metal. Inside, I could hear the distinctive chittering of hive-spawn communication. "How many?" I whispered. Cadet Kane tilted her head, listening to sounds that were beyond my hearing range. 47 adult warriors, 12 spawn carriers, 6 broodmothers. That is a target-rich environment, she corrected with that predatory smile. That is an entire invasion force. She moved to the breached entrance, looked inside for exactly 3 seconds, then turned back to me. "Turekval, do you remember when I said that yesterday's fight was not impressive?" "Yes. This is what impressive looks like." She disappeared through the breach, like a force of nature given human form. Through the shattered doorway, I could see flashes of movement, hear the distinctive sounds of exoskeletons being shattered and vital organs being ruptured. The chittering communication of the hive-spawn rose to panicked screams as they encountered something their evolutionary programming had not prepared them for. A human who fought like a force of nature itself. The sounds of combat lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Then silence fell over the command center like a blanket. The room looked like a slaughterhouse designed by an insane artist. Hive-spawn bodies were scattered everywhere, their chitinous remains forming abstract patterns across the floor and walls. The air reeked of their luminescent vital fluids and the ozone smell of energy weapons discharge. In the center of it all stood Cadet Kane, somehow still pristine despite being surrounded by the remains of an entire invasion force. She was working at the central command console, her fingers dancing over controls with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this before. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Sending a message," she replied without looking up from the console. The main display activated, showing a tactical readout of the surrounding space. Dozens of hive-spawn vessels hung in the darkness around the station, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. "To them," she said, indicating the ships on the display, "and to whatever sent them." Her fingers moved across the console, accessing systems that I had not known existed. Hidden weapon batteries emerged from concealed positions throughout the station. Shields that had been disguised as structural elements powered up to full strength. The academy was not just an educational facility. "To who?" "The entire station is a weapon," I breathed. "It was a fortress." "The entire station is a message," she corrected. "A very specific message that says if you threaten human space, this is what happens to you." The weapons opened fire. In 17 seconds, the entire hive-spawn fleet was gone. Not the standard plasma batteries I had expected. These were something entirely different. Energy beams that seemed to tear reality itself, reaching out across space to touch the alien vessels. Where they connected, the organic hulls simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not blown apart, just erased from existence as if they had never been there at all. "Experimental weapons?" I asked weakly. She turned to face me and her expression was equal parts predatory satisfaction and grim professionalism. "Proof of concept," she replied, "for technology that officially does not exist. Developed by a species that officially poses no threat to galactic security. This is what we are, Turekval. This is what humans become when you threaten the things we care about. We do not just fight wars. We end them, permanently. We'll spread word of what happened here to whatever intelligence controls them. And that intelligence will think very carefully before sending forces into human space again. The hive-spawn will return to being Cadet Kane, attending classes and pretending to be just another student, until the next time someone needs a reminder of why attacking humanity is a very bad idea. And you! We stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the remains of creatures that had terrorized entire star systems. The Academy's emergency lighting had switched back to normal, casting everything in stark relief. "I have one final question," I said. "The 17,000 casualties from Operation Silent Thunder, what were you fighting?" "Ask it." "And that solution was?" Her expression grew distant, as if she was remembering something that existed beyond the boundaries of normal nightmare. "Something that makes hive-spawn look like training exercises," she said quietly. "Something that required a very specific type of solution." "Enough," she replied. "More than enough." "How many others?" "Me," she said simply, "and others like me. Humans who have been turned into something that can fight monsters on their own terms." "How many others?" "Enough," she replied. "More than enough." As rescue teams began arriving to secure the station and tend to the survivors, I found myself looking at Cadet Kane with new understanding. She was not just a weapon, she was a promise. A guarantee that humanity would protect what it valued no matter the cost. And the cost, I realized, was creating people like her. Soldiers who could walk through hell itself and emerge ready for the next battle. 3 hours later, the Academy was back to normal. Emergency repairs were underway, replacement security teams had arrived. The bodies had been cleared away and the evidence of what had really happened was being classified at levels that made my previous discoveries look like children's games. Cadet Kane sat in her usual seat in the repaired classroom, taking notes as Professor Hasknine resumed his lecture on siege warfare tactics. She looked like any other student, focused on her studies and preparing for her next examination. But I knew better now. I knew that beneath the facade of Academy Cadet lay something that made the most dangerous predators in the galaxy look like harmless pets. Something that could walk through an invasion force and emerge without a scratch. Something that could turn entire fleets into distant memories with the press of a button. I knew that humanity had not just joined the galactic community as another species seeking its place among the stars. They had joined as the ultimate insurance policy against the things that lurked in the darkness between worlds. And sometimes, when the situation was desperate enough, that insurance policy took the form of a small human woman who attended tactical theory classes and sent bullies to the infirmary in 15 seconds. As I watched her take notes on defensive positioning strategies, I realized that the most terrifying thing about Mira Kane was not what she had done to the hive-spawn invasion force. It was knowing that somewhere out there in the vast darkness of space there were things that required her full attention to handle. Things that made today's demonstration look like a practice exercise. Things that made even humans like her check their weapons twice before going to work. The galaxy was a much more dangerous place than any of us had realized. But it was also a much safer place, because humanity was watching over it. And when humanity watches over something, nothing in the universe is stupid enough to threaten it twice. Class dismissed.